Hey everyone, I'm Tom and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about some books and series that I was right about. And what I mean by that is, most people when they pick up a book, they're picking it up because they think they're going to like it or they want to read it. Now, I have a couple on this list that fall into that category, but I also have some that fall into maybe a couple different categories. And I think it will make sense as we get into the video. And it also gives me a chance to highlight some different series that mean a lot to me. So let's go ahead and first start off with the book that made me want to make this video in the first place, and that was Butcher's Crossing by John Williams. John Williams is not a very prolific author. I think that he only wrote 3 full-length novels, but he was an author that was very popular on BookTube a couple years ago, and I saw him mentioned a lot by a lot of channels that I follow personally. And I had heard that this was going to probably be the weakest of his novels, but I just recently finished playing Red Dead Redemption 2. So that old Western kind of cowboy feel was something that I was really in the mood for, and I just kept thinking of Butcher's Crossing, and I was like, I think this book is going to scratch that itch perfectly. Butcher's Crossing really follows a buffalo hunt, is the basic premise of it. It's more than that, but like basic level, right? And I just could not have been more right, which is a great feeling. It scratched that itch perfectly, and it also gave me the opportunity to experience this author who I think I'm really going to enjoy as we move forward. Another book that kind of falls into this similar category is maybe 2, 3 years ago at this point, I was on Chatting with Nuts with Jimmy, and he talked to me about Demon Copperhead. And just after we kind of talked and got to know each other a little bit, he told me that I should read Demon Copperhead. And after he explained what the story was about, I knew that it was going to hit home for me. And it actually ended up being one of my favorite books I've ever read. It's one of the few 5-star books I have ever read since I started keeping track, so many years ago in 2019. Demon Copperhead is really just kind of like the trials and tribulations of a child in rural Appalachia, and it hit home. I just like knew once Jimmy told me about it that this was going to be a book that I absolutely loved, and I did. And once again, a very powerful experience, one that I have really championed this book. This is one of the few books that I recommend to everybody, no matter who you are. I think this is just kind of one of those ones that anybody can read and get something really important out of, even if you end up not liking the book, which is, I think, a really of high value when it comes to reading, where sometimes even if you might not personally like it, there's still something you can get out of it. Now, the next one kind of falls into the category of I read it almost begrudgingly, and that was because I didn't think I was going to like it, and unfortunately I was correct. And we were talking about the sci-fi, I mean, this is a pillar of sci-fi. So many people absolutely love this story, and that is Blindsight by Peter Watts. Now, why did I even read this if I didn't think I was going to like it? Well, part of it was I do like to experience what genres have to offer, and when something is held up like a pillar, like Blindsight is, I feel like I need to experience it, even though I kind of went into it, and maybe that's part of why I didn't like it. I came into it with my hands up, didn't think I was going to like it that much. It kind of explored some subject matter that I don't really find all that fascinating. It takes place with honestly, some weird stuff. There's like a vampire in this, but it's sci-fi. Just all kinds of really weird stuff going on, and a lot of it revolves around the conversation of consciousness and like what is it to be conscious and have that ability of like self and some stuff like that. And I just knew going into it, I didn't like it. It was one of my least favorite books I read. I think I read that in 2014, so about 2 years ago now. It's one of my least favorite books I read then. I didn't think I was going to like it at the time. And like I said, I do think there's something to be said for going into a book thinking you're not going to like it and then kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. But that was the case. I was unfortunately correct with Blindsight as well. Next up, we have 2 fantasy pillars. And I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek. The first one, obviously, hands down, pretty much everybody loves this book, or it's really a series. I guess some people consider it one book, but that is The Lord of the Rings. And unfortunately for me, I like The Lord of the Rings. And a lot of times when you say that here on BookTube, that's not enough. You really need to love The Lord of the Rings. You need to think it is probably the greatest gift to literature that fantasy has ever had. And that's just not the case for me. And I knew that going in. I felt like I needed to read it once again because it is such a pillar of fantasy, and I just liked it. It was fine. It's good. I understand how important it is for the fantasy genre and everything like that, but for me, it just didn't work all that well. We can include The Hobbit in here. I read all 4 of those books, and it was just it was fine. It's good. I can see why so many people connected with it. I do always also throw in this one caveat that I bet more people like Lord of the Rings because of the movies than they do for the books, because that's just my crazy idea with no backing whatsoever. And the other pillar of the fantasy genre that like I said, I'm saying kind of jokingly that I was right about was Fourth Wing. So I read this with my fiance, and I thought that it wouldn't be as bad as people said. I did go into it expecting it not to be that great, but I was pretty confident that a lot of the people who were hating on it and just kind of trashing it constantly had never even read it, and that it couldn't be that bad. If it were this popular with so many people, there's no way it could be as bad as people said. And while, yeah, some of the dialogue is a little cringy, the story doesn't always make a whole lot of sense. It is still fun. It's a good time, and I was right. It wasn't nearly as bad as I was afraid it was going to be. I have since read the two other books that are out. So what is that? Iron Flame and Onyx Storm. I have read both of those, and I guess it's the Imperium cycle or whatever it is. But I've been right that just in general, this series is not nearly as bad as some people say that it is. Which is a good thing for me. And the last three are some very heavy hitters for me personally. So those are going to be the Stormlight Archive. When I started this channel, part of it is I finally decided to read all of Brandon Sanderson. I had not read any Brandon Sanderson up to the point of me starting this channel back in 2023, I think. That sounds right now, so long ago. But I knew that in my reading order, the real gem of the Cosmere was going to be the Stormlight Archive. And I could not have been more right. I think Stormlight is pretty much head and shoulders above everything else that has gone on in the Cosmere up until this point. I mean, I think Mistborn is a strong second place there, but to me, going in, finally getting to the Way of Kings was like everything I had wanted up until that point, and I just knew. I don't know why. I didn't just read them first. It's because I know why. I had a silly reading order that was supposed to be the best for the Cosmere at the time, but I just knew that everything was really going to start to click together when we got to the Stormlight Archive, and that was true. This will be the last fantasy edition here, coming in the penultimate spot, and that is the Wheel of Time. I knew that the Wheel of Time was probably going to be for me very, very early on when I started hearing about it. The magic system is what just grabbed me immediately. Hearing about the two sides, that male and female wielders of the power have different things, and that the male side is going crazy, and like actually crazy, right? And I just knew that that sounded so interesting that alone was probably going to be able to carry me through a lot of the story. And once I learned it was 14 books, I was maybe a little less sure, but I knew pretty early on that it was going to be right, or that it was going to be for me, and I was right about it. And I think the series that I called my shot with the most, and to the point where I actually didn't read the series for multiple years after I learned about it because I knew I was going to like it so much, and I wanted to be in the perfect space to read it, is Sun Eater. And so I obviously came to a conclusion last year with the release of book 7, but I called my shot. It is probably my third favorite series of all time at this point. And before I even read book 1, I thought it would be an absolute all-time series for me. And just from the space epicness, the space opera epicness of it, I just was like, this is going to be a story. Everything I had ever heard about it, I was like, I'm going to love this series. And like I said, I completely avoided it. I avoided spoilers. If anybody even started to mention Sun Eater, I would either click off the video or skip super far ahead. I skipped and avoided every Sun Eater spoiler, which is incredible to think of now with how much Sun Eater content there was out there. The fact that I was able to avoid so much of it at the time and ended up being so right about the series was just like such an awesome experience when it came to reading. So those are just some I came up with. And actually, funny enough, when I was making this list, it was actually way easier to pick out books that I was wrong about. So I'm actually going to do that video probably next week and go and look at some books that I was just completely wrong about, both positive and negative again. But I would love to know, what books were you right about? What books did you call your shot on that you knew you were going to absolutely love when you read it, or hated? Either way, you knew you were going to hate read something. I'd love to hear that all down below in the comments, or as always in the Discord that is linked in the description. That's going to be all for me. And remember to read what you want when you want.